Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to this event tonight. It's the launch of the Phibsboro Village Climate Club, and I'm going to take you through the agenda. So we're going to start. On time because we've a lot to get through. We'll start by I'll give you an introduction to what we're doing. Then we'll go on to the Sustainable Energy Master Plan. Then we'll address the Biodiversity Action Plan, Circular Economy Map, the Climate Club, what that means, and the questions and answers at the end. Susan, you might let people in now if I'm flicking through the slides.
Yes, I'm doing that.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks. So just to give some background, what is a sustainable energy community? You probably are all aware of this now if you've joined, but basically the main benefit is that it allows communities to think about the way we use energy in a different way. And it gives us an opportunity to work together to achieve local goals around energy use and the elimination of carbon. So what can we do with it in Phibsboro? So it's basically around how we would identify a fossil-free future for Phibsboro, and also it helps us then collaborate between ourselves and our neighbours in Cadver and Stony Batter. We've also set up a sustainable energy community. And perhaps most importantly, it does provide financial support for local actions. So who we are, the Sustainable Energy Community is established by Phibsboro Village Tidy Towns, and it's sponsored by the Mater Hospital, which we're very grateful. Within the Village Tidy Towns, there's a sustainability group, and you can see the members there. So they come from a good cross-section of the area. We had some additional members who were with us before, and some new members who have just joined recently. So there will be a link in the chat if you want to get in touch with us. You're welcome to participate as well. So, and then myself, I've set up this Climate 23 as a local business here in Phibsboro to develop community action around climate change. And Ivan Sproul, who's on the call tonight, and Pat Duke as well. The three of us have worked for well over 15 years together now on various SCAI projects. So within Phibsboro then, the boundaries that we set for the sustainable energy community, as you can see there, highlighted in green, it basically covers the area where Tidy Towns is active in the area. So you can see it's mainly Dublin 7, but it does cross the canal into Dublin 7 and so Dublin 9 and 11. Obviously, there's a lot of energy in the area other than the electricity and gas, supported by the foundation of the community of the Bohemian Football Club, and you can see there that it's kind of seen as an area to visit by tourists, etc. So, what did we discover in our research into the community as part of the development of the master plan? The amount of people, with basically 50% of them between the ages of 20 and 40. And of the homes in Phibsboro, 50% of the residents are not homeowners, they're homeowners, that they are renting. And with the cars, 50% of the residents don't own a car. So the government incentives for addressing climate change around retrofitting houses and moving to electric vehicles are not necessarily relevant to a lot of people in this area. And we were wondering then, well, how do we engage people within the area then around energy use? And of course, whether everybody is paying for energy from one way, or whether you're a homeowner or whether you're renting, you're still buying energy. So what we've identified is then that there's potential really then for collective community purchasing of energy, and the whole idea of community power schemes is something that we're going to take further because as you can see there, there's potentially €30 million a year leaving the community, which we could be harnessing. So what can you do? There's a link there in the chat, which basically, if you want to sign up to that and just give us your details, we can share further information with you as we go on. We'll be publishing the master plan and the biodiversity plan, and if you want to receive a copy of that by email or even by hard copy, just sign up on that link and we can forward it to you in due course. So to give you some context as to why we're doing this, the topic of the energy transition is basically it's a popular idea, and it's how the industry is developing. You can see on the left hand side, traditionally the energy came from large power plants, and the consumer was kind of really just sort of passive and just paying for the cost of it wherever it came from, and that's still the case really in a lot of instances. However, the future is that consumers can become involved, either generating their own energy or by participating in a collective community system, and then they can then start producing energy and have some sense of ownership of it as well. And this is an area that tidy towns will be developing further. The idea of decarbonising Phibsboro is, in essence, it means the removal of carbon from our fuel supply, which is obviously a tall order. The government has set targets for 50% or 55% reduction by 2030. And carbon can be categorized under these three scopes, and depending on whether you're using energy, or you're purchasing it, or you're using it in your travels or as part of a supply chain. And by categorizing it in these ways and with the solution shown there, that's the summary of the approach that we're taking. So just then to give you some headline figures on the Energy Master Plan. As you can see there, the total energy cost for each year is nearly 30 million. The emissions, 74,000 tons. And, you know, to absorb that amount of carbon, we would need to plant nearly 500,000 trees in Phibsboro. So, I mean, it's unlikely that we're going to turn Phibsboro into a forest. So we need to address the carbon emissions in other ways, as we just identified there. And how that energy is split over the community, it's in essence the two biggest areas are the residential, the housing, and then the public sector, the large the prison, the hospital, the fire station, the guards, etc. These are all big energy spenders in the area. And we go, and this is it gives you a sort of a breakdown there of where the energy is. You know, the electricity, the fossil fuel, which is gas, and you can see there's no renewables as yet really being used in Phibsboro. Now people might say, well, I buy my electricity from a supplier and they tell me that it's 100% renewable. Well, it may well be, but it still has to go into the electricity grid, and when it goes into the grid and it goes into your home, it's the grid itself is not renewable. It's still full of fossil fuels to generate.
Webinar. You all right?
Yeah. Only one person tried to kill him the other way around.
Where's your?
Themselves, and we can take questions at the end. If that's okay. So some of the flagship opportunities that we thought that we would be or are looking to develop. One of the schemes is the SEAI Warmer Home Scheme, which is a good scheme in that if you're an eligible individual, i.e. if you're in receipt of a specific welfare payment, you're entitled then to get an energy upgrade on your home for free of charge. However, as we saw this as a good opportunity then to kind of develop a local supply chain for retrofitting in Phibsboro. But as we've discovered, unfortunately, then because the housing in Phibsboro is red brick and or stone in some cases, there's no suitable insulation available at the moment for that. So that's kind of something that we're investigating further. It's a bit of a stumbling block. The idea also then of solar PV, which is electricity generated on rooftops. We've done an initial estimate of that. If we were to put 10% of the area with solar PV, that we could generate potentially €6 million per year of energy. So if it was 20%, it would be 12 million, etc. Then the Eternal Flame. This is a sculpture opposite the Mater Hospital in the Four Masters Park, which you may know about. And this flame it's actually out at the moment because it's provided by gas, and obviously gas is not going to be an eternal energy source. I mean, that's the whole point of decarbonisation. And what that means really is that potentially the gas supply, there's potential for the gas supply to use renewable gas in the form of biogas, but the current plans are that it would only be around 20% of that by 2030. So we're saying that really in Phibsboro that would be a big help if the gas supply was decarbonised, as then it would mean that a lot of the infrastructure would not need to be changed in the house, it would be changed outside the house. So I'll hand you over now to Killian, who's one of the colleagues on the committee, and he's going to talk you through the residential sector.
Thanks very much, Jared. My name is Killian O'Neill. I'm a resident of Phibsboro and have been for 10 or more years now, and I am a secondary school teacher. And about a year ago, I joined the committee of the Phibsboro Sustainable Energy Community because I wanted to do something. As I often say to people, I was mad as hell and I didn't want to take it anymore about the climate emergency, and I didn't know what to do. So it's been great joining the SEC committee and working or seeing the enormous work already that was done by Jared and by Susan Dawson as well, in setting up and doing all of this work. And it's been great to see the work that's been done over the past year in developing this master plan, and you'll see some of it tonight and when it's published. And I'm very excited about getting going on some of those projects that Jared was talking about there. And again, we definitely ask you, any of you who are interested in this area or would like to get involved either in the committee or in any of the projects, again, please fill out that survey in the chat there. The link is in the chat, and we'd love to get some of your expertise and energy on board. So I'm just going to talk about the residential sector in Phibsboro. What we have at the moment here is we have a study, I suppose, we've done, and Jared has done a huge amount of work on this as well, about trying to figure out what houses in Phibsboro are like, how they could be improved, and where they lie. So this is like what Jared talked about earlier on, the usage of electricity and fossil fuels in Phibsboro. So there's going to be a lot of numbers here and a lot of charts. Obviously, I'll talk you through them for the next few minutes, and you'll be able to see them in the actual energy master plan itself. So the basic idea here is that, you know, we spend a lot of money in Phibsboro, or the residents in Phibsboro spend a lot of money, as we say, about €8 million on energy every year. And most of it, or all of that money, is going out of the community to buy in electricity that's generated elsewhere and fossil fuels that are generated elsewhere. So whether it be gas or coal or solid fuels and things like that. And as Jared said, one of our big projects that we're hoping to get involved in is community power, where we can get not only the people who have their own renewable supply on their own houses, but hopefully we can create solar farms of some kind on the roofs of Phibsboro and let the residents get the benefit of that, even if they don't have a roof themselves, to do that. So again, we're looking to move some of these numbers into the renewable category and spend the money on that as much as we can. So, if we have a look at some of the BER data, so for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the building energy rating is kind of the standard way we look at houses in Ireland using the SEAI's model, and it's an A to a G rating. So again, if you look at the number of dwellings in our Phibsboro Village Sustainable Energy Community area, as Jared said, stretching from Glasnevin in the north down to Broadstone in the south and east and west, there's around 7,000 dwellings. So that counts as houses, apartments, any single unit. And the percentage that are B rated or better, and we'll come back to that B rating in a minute because that's important, is just over 1%. The percentage of them that use fossil fuel for heating is 54%. And as far as we can see on the BER data, there may be a few in very, very recent years, but in terms of what's showing up, it's pretty much 0%. So our average BER in Phibsboro is an E2 rating. The national average is a C1. And in fact, as you'll see in a moment, that E2 value is actually quite generous when you consider most of the properties in Phibsboro. The newer apartment blocks that have been built in the last few years have actually dragged that number up a little bit and compensated for a lot of very, very much lower rated houses. So if we look at the dwelling types in Phibsboro, so one of the things that we've done, and Jared's done a huge amount of work on this in terms of looking at some of the Central Statistics Office data, is who lives in Phibsboro and where do they live? And the idea would be that we've got a lot of knowledge to share. We've got a lot of common, I suppose, challenges in the area in terms of dwelling. And the good news, I suppose, in Phibsboro is, there isn't an enormous variety. So if we solve the problems for most people, we're covering a lot. So if you see there on the left-hand side, the type of dwelling tenure is very interesting. Unlike a lot of other areas of the country, almost 50% of the people who live in Phibsboro rent from a private landlord. Which was something that's exercised us, as Jared said, quite a lot in terms of, it's not just as simple as looking at those adverts on the television and say, great, you own your home, go to your bank, get a loan, put on the insulation, get your solar panels on the roof, and there you go. These are people who don't own the houses they live in. And they do deserve to take part in this transition as well. And they do deserve to be able to get access to renewable energy as much as possible. On the right-hand side then, you can see the types of dwellings. Again, about 50% is a house or a bungalow, and nearly 40% is a flat or apartment. So we have again, two main types of dwellings that we're looking at. So what can we do about them, and where do they need to go? Well, the house types with a BER rating. So if we break down the houses or the dwellings here who actually have a BER rating that we can look up, and I'll show you a map in a moment. Again, we have them broken down into fairly standard groups. You can obviously see the terraced houses there. 37% are mid-terraced houses, 9% are end of terraced house, and we've very few detached houses, only 3%. Semi-detached also very small, 5% only, and apartments make up the rest of it there. So between ground floor, mid-floor, and top floor apartments, and they're listed separately because a top floor apartment is seen to lose a lot more energy through its roof than a ground floor apartment which doesn't have a roof. So you can see there again, it's terraced housing and apartments. So we have a lot of similar type houses that we can tackle. Now, this is the real, well, some would say horror show, and others would say opportunities for improvement. If you look on the left-hand side there, Jared did a fantastic thing, and he's overlaid the average BER rating onto the local area maps. And you can go down to some very great detail on the local area maps. So that general shape there is all of our sustainable energy community. And you can see it's broken up by collections of streets, small collections of streets. So I live down here in the southern end of the area down there, and you can see down near the very bottom, we've some areas that are D ratings. They tend to be the newer apartment blocks that have been built are kind of dragging the average up there, but it's Fs and Gs in a lot of it, in a lot of the area. You can see on the right-hand side there, the age there is, again, 50% of the properties are listed as a pre-1960 building, and that would be an F or a G as an average rating there. And again, the numbers of B2 to A1 ratings houses in this entire area is 1%, as we said earlier on. So the other thing that's interesting, if any of you are interested or any residents associations are interested here, myself and Gerard have given talks to some resident associations where we can actually get the data for your specific streets, and we can tell you exactly how much your street is spending on energy and what the kind of averages for the national averages would be for your street. And it can even be broken down to that level. So if you are interested, you can fill out the form in the chat on that. And we go on to heating system analysis. Gerard has spoken about this already. Again, we're looking at the majority of houses or dwellings in Phibsboro or the Phibsboro Village SEC area are heated by natural gas. Okay, they have their own boiler, generally individual boilers inside the house, spitting out greenhouse gases from the house itself. And 34% then are heated by electricity. So in the case of those houses, the greenhouse gases are emitted, but they're not emitted at the house themselves. They're emitted at a power plant somewhere, or they're not emitted if they're generated by a wind turbine. But as they say, you can't filter electrons, so you're not entirely sure where your electricity has been generated from. Although the grid is getting greener, and there is a move generally to move people towards electrical heating, whether it be heat pumps or other types of systems. But again, as Gerald said, we've such an enormous amount of natural gas as well that surely we would benefit from the decarbonisation of the gas grid. Wall construction types is interesting as well. A little bit of a variation here, but solid brick, stone or concrete, again, I suppose we would be well known for that in this area of having our brick houses. One interesting thing on that is that if you look on the left there, the concrete, or if you look to the, second left, a filled cavity, or on the far right, an unfilled cavity, those are the absolute easiest walls to insulate. You just drill a hole in them and you pump in some insulation into the cavity that's already there. The problem with solid brick, stone or concrete houses is they're relatively difficult to insulate, and there's been obviously you don't want to be wrapping a nice red brick house in external insulation if you can at all avoid it. And also there have been some issues recently where red brick houses have been neglected in terms of insulation products, and we've sort of found in our research that there is an issue around finding approved insulation products for your solid brick house if you want to be claiming certain types of grants and things like that. So we have raised a query with the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland that this is an issue that we've identified and will be very relevant to Phibsboro residents who want to insulate their homes. Moving on then to this wonderful pun up the top. This is, you're going to be hearing a lot more of this over the next few years. B2 or not to be, if I remember my school English correctly. So the target is a B2, and you'll be seeing this on a lot of any of the kind of national retrofitting schemes or SEAI schemes. There's sort of a blanket suggestion that every dwelling in Ireland should be aiming for a B2. And really, if you're applying for a grant, they really want you to get to at least a B2, unless you've got some very, very good reason why you can't get to a B2. And as you'll see in a moment, looking at the types of dwellings in Phibsboro, there is actually no particular reason why every property in Phibsboro couldn't get up to a B2 with a variety of measures. Now, why should people want to do that? The reason you'd want to do it, I suppose, is first of all, improving your energy rating means your house uses less energy. It means it's emitting less carbon, whether it's emitting it itself or emitted somewhere else. It also obviously improves the value of your house if you're interested in that. It goes on all of the literature from the estate agents, and also it can save you money. So this is a very interesting chart here. If we take, for example, a 2-bed apartment on the left-hand side, we saw there were a lot of those in Phibsboro. If you have a G-rated apartment, you're spending €3,000 a year on your heating. If you get up to that magical B2, you're spending €570 a year. And again, that gap there is one of the reasons why a lot of financial institutions are now offering really nice loans to get the work done, and SEAI are offering very nice grants because they know that the householder will get the money back. Even if you go to your semi-detached house next door, €4,000 if it's a G rating, and you get that down to 800 a year if it's a B2 rating. So what we've done, and you will see these can be shared out and as examples, and we're compiling more of these as we go along. It's trying to prove the point that houses in Phibsboro, there's no reason they can't get up to a B2, or in fact even higher. So if we look at this particular property here on Charleville Road, nothing particularly unusual about it, very similar to a lot of other houses in that area. It's currently rated an E2, and with some relatively simple improvements there: roof, wall insulation, an upgrade of windows and doors, a new ventilation system, a new heat pump in this case, and LED lighting. You're spending a reasonable amount of money there, 50,000. You're getting a grant, and you're up to your B2 rating. Okay, now obviously the householder would need a lot more, would need a lot of support in that, and that wouldn't be suitable for everybody. But that shows that it can be got up to a B2, and perhaps you could also add your solar PV panels on the roof to get up to an A2, or that might replace one of the other measures that you've already looked at above. Okay, I'll move through these quite quickly here then. Here we have one of our beautiful G-rated houses here, Geraldine Street, which is near where I live. These are in this house here. It looks very nice, but is a G rating. Again, with some relatively simple measures: roof insulation, wall insulation, and window upgrades and ventilation. We're already up to a D2, and getting us up to a B2 then requires a new heating system and the lighting upgrades there. And again, we can in fact get this to an A3 if we put the solar panels on the roof there. And again, you see the cost is actually a lot lower for these smaller houses, 24,000 to get up to the B2 and 30,000 to get up to the A rating. Again, another type here, a semi-detached on Iona Drive. Again, a larger house here, current rating F, and it can be got up to a B2. Again, you can see here the largest expense that we have here in this case is wall insulation and heating systems. And a mid-terrace on Munster Street. Again, we saw there were an enormous amount of mid-terrace houses in this area, going from an E2 to a B2, again, somewhere around 25, 30,000 there, depending on which of those measures you go for. Shandon Gardens, another mid-terrace house, currently a D2, and a relatively low spend compared to what we've seen there before, 15,000 if you want to get it to a B, the magical B2, and another few thousand there to get up to an A2 as well. And our Eglington Terrace here, 1950s detached house. Again, we said there weren't a huge amount of these, but this can be, again, very easily brought up to a B2 with only a few different measures. Dalcassian Downs here, a more modern house, 1980s. These are the ones there near Hedigan's Pub. Going from a D2 here up to a B2 for just 17,000 euro. And again, a few other measures there to bring it up to an A rating. Again, these are not things that you have to do, but it's just to show people that it is possible to do it. And we have tools, and we've used them here in PVSEC to advise people. We have simple tools we can use to put a general idea of what you could do for your house and how much on average it would cost. And the fantastic thing is, if a number of residents get together, and this is something we're working on as well, instead of just applying for your renovation yourself, you can combine your renovations together, your retrofits together, and claim back around 30% of the project cost from SEAI. So it is an enormous advantage. So I'll just point you towards our residential cluster Padlet page as well, and we'll share out the link to that. We're building that up with some of our kind of information for people who want to look at renovations and residential improvements. So that would be your first point of call there. And as I said before as well, we would really love to have some excited and exciting people to join us and have a look at some of those projects around, whether it be the residential area, the community power, or some of the areas that Ivan is about to look at now. So I'll pass you over back to Jared and then to Ivan. And thanks very much, everybody, for listening.
Thanks so much, Killian. Ivan, your mic is on.
I just mentioned there, Jared, you don't want to offer if anybody has any questions after Killian's very interesting
Yeah, I think we might take the questions at the end, Ivan.
presentation. He raised a few very
Yeah.
fine. Okay, so right. Well, Ivan Sproul is my name. I'm based in Sligo. I'm a Sligo Rovers supporter. I think we'll be fighting it out with Bohemians for a place in Europe this season. But I'm here wearing green. No, not Shamrock Rovers green. In fact, we're playing Shamrock Rovers on Saturday night. And it's an interesting fact that one of the times there was a very memorable cup final in the Aviva Stadium between Sligo and Shamrock Rovers, and sitting behind us in the stand was about 30 Bohemian supporters cheering for Sligo Rovers. So it was an incredible situation, and we actually won the cup. That was the famous one where the liberties or something like that. Okay, so yeah, I'm ex-SEI. I worked in SEI and all the previous iterations of it for over 40 years, and decided to, when I had 40 years service up, that I'd jump ship and retire early, and that's what I've done. And I'm working with Geraldine on this project, and I'm also working on a number of other projects in the whole area. So I suppose I have a lot of experience under my belt in this field. So the commercial sector, why am I not getting movement here? Oh, there it is now. Sorry. Yeah. So we again, using the CSOD and CODEM in the City of Dublin Energy Management Agency, they extrapolated out all the information for the commercial sector, and based on kind of standardized energy performance values for different types of facilities, we worked out roughly how much electricity each business would use depending on the nature of the activity. We also worked out how much space heating they would use, etc. And this is what we've come up with, that the business in the area would be consuming roughly in the region of 4.2 million euros of energy. Don't know what's wrong there.
Move it off your, yeah.
Now. So the overall stats from the CSO indicated that there's over 800 in the year and 7 not occupied, so no energy data in relation to those. Again, the breakdown of energy use by fuel type, 52% of the energy, total energy, is thermal energy. That would be gas for heating, or indeed oil, maybe perhaps for the business, and 47% were using electricity. And then the emissions from the facilities was put at 52% on electricity and 48% for thermal energy. And the total estimated tonnes emitted by the commercial sector within the area is 25,730 tonnes. Yeah. This is kind of the distribution of the types of facilities that are within the Phibsboro community area. So as you can see, over 30% are administrative offices. So they would be businesses and things like that operating out of offices. So all your solicitors and others within the area. And then another 30% is accounted for by retail stores. So your super values and all your corner stores, news agents and that. And then there was none listed, the number of properties that there was no listing accounted for 40% of the total were restaurants, and the rest, as you can see, are made up by some other smaller areas, and 2% by car parks and that, and then 1% by the clubhouse, which I presume would be the Bohemians Football Club in this instance. So what I've done here, and indeed what we've done for the residential sector, is we've looked at what the government has in their climate action plan, which was launched there a few weeks ago by the government. And within the commercial sector, they have asked kind of businesses to look at a 20 to 25% reduction in CO2 emissions and a 40 to 50% in transport emissions. And then opportunities, retail outlets. So within that challenge, I think we would see kind of lighting upgrades and perhaps PV on the roofs of those facilities to tackle the electricity side of it. And then for offices, I suppose what we'd be looking at there maybe is looking at introducing some heat pump technologies and things like that, as well as insulating the buildings themselves. It's always a fabric first kind of methodology that people should be looking at. You reduce the energy demand down, and then you add in a more energy efficient appliance for generating that heat. So obviously, as I said, we would focus in on retail and offices, and then the number of technology options that in order to deliver on those targets, look at fabric upgrades from buildings. So that's increasing the levels of fabric insulation. If it's possible to do it, it may not be possible in every instance. Lighting and controls, modern LED lights consume maybe 70 to 80% less electricity. Occupancy controls then to switch them on and off when there's nobody in the area or in the space or in the room, or indeed daylight link controls that would switch them off or turn them down when there's enough natural daylight to light the actual office or area itself. As I said earlier, heat pumps for space heating. BMS and heating controls. This tends to be an area from my own experience that's neglected in a lot of facilities, and indeed in my own house where we installed your considerable savings on that basis. The other in these types of facilities is freezer controls for retail outlets where they have lots of deep freezers and things like that. Another study that I was working on with another company indicated that there was a large potential on the actual controls for controlling the temperatures themselves within the freezers, that many of them weren't operating to the right standard, and that there was huge potential there. And obviously you may have seen this happening anyhow in lots of shops in recent times where they've installed insulated doors and lighting and stuff like that to actually reduce down the electricity consumption for those fridge stores and refrigeration units. People might say it's a bit awkward now getting the products out of these fridges, but for the business themselves, it's savings, it's coming off the bottom line, it helps to increase their profitability, it helps to retain jobs within the area and stuff like that as well. And obviously, as I said, for photovoltaic panels to generate electricity on the roof. And there's quite a good benefit there for some of these shops, because during the daytime, and particularly in summertime, freezer air temperatures will rise, demand for electricity goes up. So if they have the likes of the photovoltaic panel generating electricity on the roof, it helps to offset their electricity consumption there. So the 30% CO2 savings to it would equal 7,000 saving within the area then would be roughly 3.1 million. So it's a considerable cash injection for the businesses that might allow them to reinvest back into the business and maybe expand the business up, create more employment and stuff like that as well. So some of the things that we will be looking at then in the long term with the commercial businesses, we will be encouraging them to avail of a free energy audit that's now been funded by the SEAI. I think it's something that you know, it's a good starting point for a business. See how much energy you're using, see what, and then draw up some kind of a plan to actually go ahead and implement those projects that the business can benefit, but more importantly, nationally, that it helps to reduce the emissions and help us to meet these targets. And then the second area then is that there's energy MAP training. MAP stands for Energy Management Action Plan, actually, and SEI have developed up this training, and many of even the largest businesses operating in Ireland, spending several millions of euros on energy, have availed of this energy MAP training, and they would have seen this as a precursor to them going on to get certified to the ISO 50001 standard, which help them to implement long-term energy management programs that is just not forgotten about. And then obviously part of the local climate club that Gerald has initiated here within the area is to participate in some kind of a local energy management group where people will learn from others, maybe learn from what other people have done and things like that. And within the overall area, we'll be classifying the businesses within particular types, that people from these particular groups then will embark on the training together, that we won't, that it will maximize the benefits for the training for those participants then. So we're looking at probably up to 4 or 5 clusters there where this energy management training will be implemented. And again, some of the kind of the pathways to delivering on the actual actions within the group. I'm not going to go into it in any great detail here. I presume Gerard will be circulating these presentations and making them available to everybody as part of the program delivery, so people can read about it and they'll have an opportunity to ask us questions anyhow at some point. So that's the commercial sector. And also on the municipal services, which really we're looking at here is the public sector. So again, within the public sector, you have, of course, you have the hospital, Mater Hospital, and you have the prison service here. You have a lot of Garda stations and things like that within the area, and you have your schools, etc., etc. So the total energy spend within the region is in the region of 13 million, so it's a good bit bigger than the commercial sector, and also the tons of CO2, over 30,000 tons of CO2 been generated within the area. So it's really quite considerable, and it's something, you know, that within the framework of the new climate action plan, quite stringent targets for the public sector, and so I think, you know, it'll be quite challenging for them to meet those particular targets. This is just the kind of the breakdown of the public sector tenure within the area. There are really 19 large public sector organizations and 79 facilities within that. And as I said, healthcare, the Mater Hospital, Mountjoy Prison, lots of educational facilities. And then you have the Garda stations. I think there's 2 Dublin bus garages within the area. You have fire stations, and then you have office buildings occupied by other government agencies and departments. And again, the action plan and what the government has proposed there. And the big one is the improvement in energy efficiency of public sector buildings by 50%. But the most challenging one of all, I think, is going to be this absolute emissions reduction target of 51% by 2030. That is going to be very, very challenging. And, you know, we can, as Killian said earlier on about the grid being decarbonised, there's a lot of talk about, you know, upping the number of heat pumps within facilities and things like that. I think the natural gas grid, Board Gas are talking about putting 20% renewable gas within the grid. So all those measures will help, but still the public sector building operators and managers themselves, they will have an awful lot to do. CO2 emissions reduction would be the photovoltaic panels that Gerard alluded to earlier on, because that will give them a direct hit in their CO2 emissions. And then there's a number of other areas that I'm not going to go into in any great detail that the Minister has written into this climate action plan for the public sector. And obviously, again, as Killian said earlier about the BERB, all buildings have to achieve, or all public buildings have to achieve a BERB by 2030. So it's really quite a substantial challenge. Again, some of the projects that we have looked at and kind of each one might deliver. LED lights, top of the list, very, very easy to implement, gives you a direct savings of the electricity supply. you might hear a helicopter flying overhead here. We're in a flight pad for the search and rescue helicopter here heading out to Strand Hill. Pumps, fans, air handling units, looking at how to improve the efficiency and operation controls on those. BMS controls. BMS is a building energy management system. There's a new directive coming out, or a new building regulation coming out in the next 2 years or so, that all buildings will be required to have a building energy management system installed in them. And there'll be an interim period where will be given an opportunity over 2 to 3 years to upgrade any of their control systems to include that. But all new buildings, I think it's from next year on, will have to have this type of system installed. It's going back to the old saying that if you're not measuring, you can't manage it. So that'll be, I presume, some form of measurement and control and monitoring and reporting will be built into those systems as well. And then on the space heating side again, heat pumps and fabric, looking at upgrading the insulation, windows, walls, and pumping cavities and things like that. And again, there's a lot of buildings within this sector that probably, I wouldn't say listed buildings, but certainly buildings of significant architectural hygiene within the area for you to achieve the kind of levels of savings that we're talking about there. But you know, there are modern technologies and things like that, and new ways of doing things, as Killian said as well, coming out. So I would expect, you know, that it will be achieved. And then kind of the target savings there. Those measures will deliver a 62% reduction in CO2, and obviously 65% reduction in energy, so easily surpassing any of the government targets that are set there. On the transport sector then, again, what we done here with the transport sector was oh, I'm gone a step ahead of myself. This is kind of the general use for the transport sector within the Phibsboro region. So what we done here was we took the CSO data, where there are just a little over 3,000 cars, 3,400 cars within the owned by people living in and used by people in the Phibsboro area. And then what we done was we took the licensing registration data from the Department of Transport and looked at the different types of transmission systems: petrol, diesel, hybrid, electric, and all that, and applied kind of extrapolated out differently to the numbers for the Phibsboro region. And this is what we come up with then in terms of the amount of fossil fuel, that would be petrol and diesel, that the cars are using, and the amount of electricity that the cars are using. Because we didn't have sub data for kind of the Phibsboro area. So the electricity, when we analysed it, it came out that there would be 33 electric cars possibly within the Phibsboro Village area. And that's the amount of electricity that they would be using annually and responsible for emitting 30 tonnes of CO2. And overall, roughly 3.8 million being spent on petrol, diesel within the area. And again, going back to the what you call, and this again, like as Jared said earlier on about the or was it Killian, about the mix of houses and the, you know, the number of private rented houses. This is very interesting too. The area is way above the national average in terms of the number of people using public transport, 24% walking and cycling, nearly at 40%. It's incredible. Incredible statistic altogether. So, you know, that we talk about decarbonising the transport sector. There is a lot that still can be done, but there's an awful lot of good things going on in the Phibsboro area, it has to be said. And what will come out in the plan then, when we write up the plan for you, we will show you, you know, there aren't that many cycleways within the area, and that so it's going to be challenging to come up with lots of kind of cycleways. You have an awful lot of busy routes running through the area. traffic coming in from 3 or 4 different directions. You know, the junction there at, is it Doyle's Corner, Hart's Corner. There's no space there for proper cycle lanes, for safe cycle lanes or anything like that. So if you want to kind of decarbonize it, look for a modal shift, it's going to be very, very challenging in this particular space. So this is the kind of the statistics that I've extrapolated out of the data. Well, there are 3,420 cars according to the CS. No cars. 1,300 use their cars for work. 50% of the cars will be petrol and 44% are diesel. 1%, as I said, are battery electric vehicles, and 5% are or 200 will be hybrid or diesel cars within the area. But again, 63% of the population within the area directly from the CSO are either walking, cycling, or using public transport, way above the national average. And then that's the amount of energy and the estimated emissions by the sector within the area. We didn't look at the heavy goods vehicle transport because we didn't have any data available. We basically just had the data for Dublin City Council, and we had nothing out of the CSO to extrapolate it out. What's within the government climate action plan? Again, the government says that they're going to increase the number of electric vehicles to 936,000 nationally, and that's out of, I don't know, is it maybe 2 million cars or something like that. 840 passenger EVs, that would be buses, converted to EVs, 95,000 electric vans and trucks, 1,200 electric buses, and then they're going to increase the proportion of biofuels in road transport, raised to 10% in petrol and 12% in diesel. I think it's something like 2 to 3% at the moment, but I stand to be corrected on that. And as I said earlier, the traffic through Transport Village is huge. And I'm sure that's been emitted by those vehicles passing through has to have some impact on the residents' health and well-being. And I think it'd be fantastic if we could do something within the area to try and tackle that, whether it's looking to get them to bypass the area, maybe introduce some form of a tax that they pay or a toll. It's been done in other cities, you know, and generate an income for us to invest in upgrading houses or, you know, other facilities and things like that. So what does these targets mean then in terms of the transport portfolio that I've modeled out? I don't know why we're not getting the change there. Oh God, we're gone way ahead. Must be a delay on it. Sorry about this. Right. You haven't it on an auto run forward, Jared, by any chance? Okay, so what I've looked at here is that if we took the number of people that are driving cars and we said we encourage 20% of them to leave the car at home and work from home, which is, you know, it's plausible enough given the current climate. A lot of people working from home, so now stay at home and work from home. And then if we look at a modal shift, again, if we said that 20% of the remaining people that would be in cars would switch to either walking or using things like that. And then along with the government target to increase the uptake on hybrids and battery electric vehicles, we have said 20% switching to plug-in hybrids. And then that's where they have a petrol diesel engine and an electric that they could use for cruising around in areas, and then when they need to go further afield that they would use their diesel and or petrol engine to kick in then. And then the other one was to switch 45% to the battery electric vehicles. Based on the climate action plan, the target would be about 42% battery electric vehicles. And that would deliver a 50% reduction in CO2. So that's how that would pan out. Again, as I said, this is based on modeled, based on the Dublin City Council cars extrapolated out to the 3,400 odd within the area. That's my bit. Thank you for listening. I hope that you found it interesting enough. And despite the flying the red flag in Sligo, I'll be here to help the Phibsboro community as best I can through this piece of work. Okay.
Thanks very much, Ireland. Thank you very much. So that's a summary then of the energy master plan that we've developed. And as we mentioned at the beginning, we're going to also now talk about the Biodiversity Action Plan. And I'll hand you over now to Susan, who will take us through that. Thank you very much, Susan.
Oh, hi. Well, thank you very much, Jared. So, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, I'm Susan Dawson. I'm the chairperson of Phibsboro Village Tidy Towns and a member of the Biodiversity Action subgroup. We had hoped to present the Biodiversity Action Plan this evening, but it is not completed yet for a number of reasons. So I will give you a summary of where we are to date. So the objectives, basically, we have to think globally and act locally. So the plan's action is to mitigate against climate changes by increasing biodiversity at the local level. And we do this by understanding first existing biodiversity through data collection, and then analysing the data, identifying actions to increase biodiversity in Phibsboro, and monitor results through continuous data collection and analysis. So this is a collaborative approach. So we're working with the community and ecologists, Dublin City Council, and then also state agencies such as Waterways Ireland. The methodology, well, first of all, we had to engage ecologists to lead the project, which is funded by the Community Foundation of Ireland. We have two ecologists working with us, Mary Tubridy and Niamh Burke. And we're using citizen science to map and identify trees, fauna and flora, to identify deficits of biodiversity in Phibsboro. So the citizen science, we have a number of volunteers who have been mapping the trees and the flora, and then engaging with the local community at an early stage to enable us to take ownership of the plan. There is no point creating a plan and leaving it to sit on a shelf or in a computer. Thus, we had a number of meetings prior to the lockdown and moved to online engagement until this summer, when we were able to meet ourselves outside for the citizen science part of the project. We engaged with the state agencies and with Dublin City Council. Dublin City Council own a lot of land in this area, so it is essential that we collaborate with them. Waterways Ireland also has a lot of data available to us. And then the analysing of the data and the collection that's been collected to establish achievable interventions to increase biodiversity. And this is being done by the two ecologists for us. So this is Niamh Burke at Blessington Station with the late Ed Bowden. We were very sad to hear soon after we'd met him of his sudden passing away. So Niamh was analysing, collecting water to analyse the water quality. There seems to be okay. And then also, we seem to have gone backwards. The Citizen Science Project. So this is a mapping of the trees along the canal. This was done by Aoife and Mandy in the springtime. As you can see, we're still wearing our masks at that stage. And the other part of the citizen science was the collecting of the data for the flora in the area. Mary Tubridy sent us an extensive list of flora she wanted us to identify and map as part of the data collection. Right from the start, we told Mary that we as a group wanted to be involved in the collecting of data as much as possible. This is just one page of the information that we gathered. It was always important for us to engage with the local community at an early stage. So we had 3 webinars led by the 2 ecologists and in collaboration with the Ballymun Tidy Towns group. And then we also held the Buzz Fest, which is another event that is financed by the Community Foundation of Ireland. And this was demonstrating the tree mapping project. And then we worked with Be Urban in Stony Batter, who talked about the So Wild project. So nature knows no borders. It is important that we do collaborate with other groups working towards nurturing the natural environment, which is why we've been working with the Ballymun Tidy Towns, who have also engaged the same ecologists as ourselves, and also then working with Be Urban in Stony Batter. It's important to be raising awareness. So we for the last 2 years, we've had a front garden competition. And interestingly, this year, there were more messy gardens with lots of wildflowers entered compared to 2020. So I do think that this idea of biodiversity is being taken up by the local community. We also had wildlife photo competition with good responses, and then swift walks to establish where swifts are nesting and possible sites for swift boxes. So these are swift boxes at Dublin Bus Depot. We contacted Dublin Bus as last year to talk about whether they could actually put up some swift boxes. And so they put up 4 swift boxes, and each box has 3 nesting sites. This is Villabank Garden, which we planted last year. The growth, it doesn't look very colourful now, but it was much more colourful earlier on in the season. This is beside the Mountjoy car park, Mountjoy Prison car park. They're letting us have the use of the site for our garden. So it is quite a good biodiverse garden now. And this is St Michan's Church planting. St Michan's Church have allowed us to use some of their raised beds for propagating native plants, which will be then transferred into the garden and other projects we have in mind. So this is Mary and Jean in the springtime starting the planting. So we're looking at potential actions. We're thinking about hoping to install Swift Tower, and the possible locations would be the Library Gardens, Mount Bernard Park, or Great Western Square. So we're talking to Dublin City Council to see if this is something they would be able to fund for us. And then planting orchards. Host in Ireland is offering free apple, pear and plum trees, and we've applied for this. We'll be working in conjunction with Ballymun Tidy Towns. So we don't know yet whether our application has been accepted, but then we will be looking at sites, possible sites for planting the trees. Then we're looking at the Berkeley Road at North Circular Road Junction, where there's the advertising hoardings there. We're looking at possibly replacing the hedge with native hedgerows and maybe a specimen oak tree. That's something that we hope to be working on fairly soon at this stage. And then Broadstones Triangle at the advertising hoarding there. I spoke to the bus air and biodiversity officer. I've been in touch with them, and hopefully we can collaborate together to improve that site and make it to be a positive biodiverse area rather than untidy looking space at the moment. Other potential actions could be Mount Bernard Park, a wildflower meadow, and increase biodiversity in the woody areas, or Shandon Park beside the canal, planting creepers beside the wall there. Blessington Basin and the Linear Park, we could easily increase biodiversity with native plants there, working with Dublin City Council, of course. And then the Matter Masters Park. Again, we could talked to the city council who actually manage that park about planting more pollinator friendly plants in the raised beds there. So that's it for the moment, and now I'll hand you over to Gerard.
Thank you very much, Susan. We've covered the Energy Master Plan and the Biodiversity Action Plan, and the final piece is this circular economy map. So the circular economy is I suppose a change from the traditional economy. The traditional economy sees the idea of taking raw materials and resources, taking them, making them into products, and then disposing of them. So this is kind of known as a take, make, and waste model. But it's the current economic model that we've been using for the last number of years. And the circular economy model then is the idea that you don't waste and you actually can feed the products back into the start of the cycle, so that it will become a kind of a circular effect, if you like. So although it seems like a new idea, in fact it's probably the way people would have lived many years ago. And so what we wanted to do in terms of developing a kind of circular economy idea in Phibsboro was we thought we'd initially come up with a map to show what examples of circular activity there currently are in the area. And the reason for this then is I suppose to kind of demystify it and to sort of say, well, okay, so that, you know, if we are avoiding waste in certain areas, we could be avoiding waste in other areas, such as the energy. So you can see here we have the idea of reusing clothes and household goods via the various charity shops we've got in the area. There's the idea of reducing the amount of packaging around products, which is done in the non-shop, where you can go along and bring your own collection materials to purchase goods. The idea of repair, there's in terms of cycling, there's the Rojo cycling place there on Phibsboro Road, and then there's a clothing place there just on Connacht Street. And of course, the library, again, I mean, that's the circular idea as well, of the lending of books and the reuse of books, and also, of course, the reuse of knowledge. So the idea is then we will develop this map further. And one of the things we thought that actually, you know, it's really the North Circular Economy we're talking about, because you can see we have Phibsboro highlighted here, but there's also the Cabra SCC that's starting up, and the Stony Batter SCC starting up as well. And, you know, by increasing our map to encompass those areas as well, and then going a bit further north with DCU, they have a kind of circular activities unit up there. And then, of course, the main rediscovery centre there in Ballymun, which is kind of the flagship of the circular economy in Ireland. So this is where we're planning to go with this this idea of circular economy, or as we call it, the North Circular Economy. And then the idea of the Climate Club. So the idea of the Climate Club there is really to bring all of these three items or three topics that we've talked about this evening together, because they're all interlinked. And, you know, I think if you're interested in one, you're kind of interested in the other. But I think in a lot of cases, these ideas are segmented and dealt with separately. So the idea of the Climate Club is to bring these ideas together. And you can see there how they support the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, you know, it's for individuals who live in the area and also for businesses in the area. It's really to come together and to share resources and to share knowledge and learning. And of course, with the Energy Master Plan, we've talked about the current energy use, but the fact is that in Phibsboro, there's a lot of new development plans, you know, from the redevelopment of Daily Mount to new housing developments, to new metros and darts. So, you know, all of these are going to use energy in the future. So that the idea of this future energy, we contacted these developers And I suppose we're kind of challenging them in a way to sort of say tell us what are they doing around sustainability, sustainable energy, what are they doing about circular economy, and what are their plans for biodiversity. And we created this climate compatibility assessment, which is a sort of an online form that we sent to them to get their responses for how new things are planned in the future. And really, it's just to summarize now, the main benefits of the SEC, or the sustainable energy community. So if you're a homeowner, that you can get financial assistance, you can get individual grants from SEAI, but if you join in as part of a community application, that grant amount or percentage will be increased. If you're a small business, you can get a free energy audit, which will identify where potentially you're wasting energy, and potentially for where you can move away from fossil fuels to renewables. So that's a free energy audit that's available. And then once you know the state, then you can then start applying for financial support. And again, as a community grant, if we bundle up businesses and homeowners together, it will attract a better financial supports. The individual residents, then, you know, if you're not a homeowner, you're not a car owner, but you're living in the area, you know, one of the things we want to look at is how we might form together to develop a community power cooperative and collectively purchase power together. And the public sector, as Ivan mentioned, they've got challenges there, but, like, you know, I do think that they're mandated to achieve these targets by 2030, and of course it's public money that they'll be using, which is ultimately our money. So, you know, I think we should be challenging them to be looking at sustainability and the avoidance of waste with circular economy principles, and of course the maintenance of biodiversity in the area. So really, you know, it's, as Susan mentioned, it's about acting local and thinking global. And I suppose one of the key things that we want to see is that the gas supply incorporates renewable fuel probably sooner than is planned. So that's the end of our presentation, and we'll take questions and answers now. There's some questions I see in the chat. But if anybody wants to switch their mic on and ask a question, you're welcome to do that now as well. There's a min shed there, yes. So, anybody got any questions?
Could I, Jared? And
yeah.
Sorry, and sorry, this is Brian Gormley here. Sorry, I missed it, but the comment you made about decarbonising the gas network, how is that possible?
How is it possible? Well, there's the idea is that there's several means of generating biogas, and then that biogas then can be absorbed into the grid. So it could be from anaerobic digestion, where you could even take food waste, and you know that the gas from that is biogas, which can go in. There's also the whole issue of hydrogen. I mean, in Scotland, it's planned that they will, you know, that they'll move from natural gas into hydrogen. I mean, there's I suppose historically in the UK there was a time when they moved from town gas to natural gas. You know, so it's kind of a similar principle that you use the existing infrastructure to do that.
Cool. They've already started that process. Sorry for cutting in on you there. Yeah, and they opened the first injection station down the south sometime last year. So again, you know, there's opportunities for farmers, the cattle slurry feedstock to feed in to generate gas, as Jared said, through anaerobic digestion, food waste and stuff like that from hotels, collecting all that stuff, and any other areas where you know, municipal sewerage and stuff like that. So they seem to be fairly determined to try and do something, but it is going to be expensive to do it. And again, I think it's something like 20% by 2030 they're talking about there. But there a lot. It's not just the community in Phibsboro. A lot of the big pharmaceutical companies that are in Ireland, they would take the arm off somebody for biogas going into the grid, because it's the simplest way for them to decarbonize a lot of their production and stuff like that. And across in the States, the big thing is decarbonisation, even though it might not seem like that. So, you know, there's a big drive there to try and see that the grid does improve in terms of its sustainability from that point of view.
Thanks, Aaron. I see a couple of hands up there. I might get to them. So, Mary, Charlotte, want to go on to the mic? Thank you.
Dodgy action here is out, but huge well you to a really fantastic presentation tonight. I think this has probably been one of the best meetings I've been at in a very long time, because such is the quality of the data and the detailed proposals and bringing it all together. So a huge well done. I think just I suppose two things that struck me, I suppose, and then just maybe a question. Like when you talk about transport, I suppose what I really loved about that was looking at Phibsboro as a community itself, as opposed to this gateway to the city, because particularly when you look at the likes of Bus Connects, you know, we're a gateway to the city, and you talk about make a really important point about that modal shift that's required. So in terms of more cycle lanes and of course all else that is required. So I think that's a really important point. I think the second thing is just with regards to the circular economy. And I know it's a much smaller part of the presentation, but I've been kind of struck by the online presence as well with regards to the circular economy in terms of the D7 pay it forward. So again, you know, households making that concerted effort to try and pass on goods that they no longer have need for. And I suppose in that context, so kind of it's complementary to the charity shops and everything else that does go on, but I suppose there's a lot more that can be exploited there. But I suppose really kind of my question really is in terms of where next, because there's so much there and so much detail, and I feel very energized by what you presented. But I suppose, you know, I'm kind of wondering, where does this go next, and what supports need to be put in place to try and ensure that you can realize the vision that you've articulated this evening. So thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, so the idea is to establish this climate club approach, because I think, you know, it's something that we've developed as we've gone through the thinking process, if you like, and I think it's the idea that, you know, on one hand you've got the public sector who are mandated to address these challenges. And then you've got the private sector who obviously would rise to the challenge, but may not know what to do. You know, so I think, you know, by bringing those people together and sharing experiences, and especially at such a local level, like, you know, I think that's really the power of this sustainable energy communities, because, you know, we have a lot of very engaged people in the area, and you know, that's really what we're trying to do. And I suppose we haven't really communicated too much at this point, because we wanted to get the data and the information together first, because I think having a narrative around based on data it's a lot more powerful, you know. So in terms of supports going forward, I suppose it's you know, financial supports are always welcome, but, like, you know, I think it's also the feedback and encouragement from people as well is very helpful to keep the motivation up. As I say, there's a small group of us working together under the sustainability committee, and, you know, all of us working together. I think it's really, you can see the outputs from it, like, you know. So.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and Jared and Jared has done a huge amount of the work on this, and I suppose what would be great to see in this, as you may have noticed, we're kind of a bunch of engineers and technical people, so we love a bit of data, and we love some numbers. Again, I am a teacher, but I used to be an engineer for my sins. But what I would love to see, I think, is we've got, as Jared says, we've done a lot of thinking, and we've got a lot of lovely diagrams, and we've got a fantastic plan, but we need actions, and we need projects, and we need help from people in the community. If you want to take part in any of those projects that you've seen, whether it's, I mean, they're just ideas at the moment, or the very early stages, a lot of them, whether it be the residential projects, whether it be some of the municipal projects, whether it be the community power plant. We've got great ideas, we've got great research, we've got, but we need, help in the community from, if you're in a local business, if you are a resident, if you're willing to kind of lend us some of your expertise to help push on some of these projects, because what we would love to have is a suite of projects by this time next year, and we just open up this pipeline of money, wherever the money is coming from, whether it's SDAI, whether it's EU funding, whether it's any other funding. We want projects that we are ready to go with in Phibsboro to harness a lot of this. So we need, I suppose, people and ideas and enthusiasm to turn these, all the fantastic Zoom presentations in the world isn't going to save a bit of carbon. So we need to get these things done, and we've got some great ideas. So that's what we'd love to do.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, I suppose I would like to come in there, Jared. Sorry. Just, this evening we presented kind of the broad picture. And I suppose when we finish off the master plan report, we would expect to see a kind of a roadmap or a pathway, and a clear list of actions that we see that would be the next step in the program. So I think, and indeed, I don't know if you want to feed in at that stage. What we might do, Jared, is issue a draft of the report, and then maybe have a session again around that with key individuals or whatever, and then finalize the report after that.
Yeah.
Just one other thing on the funding, Jared, you didn't have it in there, but the energy suppliers are obligated to invest in energy efficiency. And I think moving forward, transport is going to be a key one for them. SEI are turning the screw on the transport sector where there's not a lot happening. So there might be an opportunity there for us to link in with whoever the main supplier is, or in with Retrofit Energy Ireland or Electricity or Energia. And obviously they work with SEI on a lot of the community projects, the Better Energy Communities schemes. So as Killian said there, if we're going to tackle this head on, economies of scale, let's on a street, let's do a street at a time or something like that, not willy-nilly. Let's just try and put this to bed, and do it all in as quick a time frame as we can for everybody's benefit. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. There's a few hands raised there, so we'll take these questions now. I think Janet Horner, you had your hand up for some time there, so. All right, thank you, Janet.
No, thanks, Million. I mean, the main thing I want to say is just I find that really, really useful and interesting, and particularly, I think that data is so useful to see mapped out. Between the BER ratings, where the energy has been used in the community, the distinction between the public sector and the private sector, I think is or the public sector emissions and commercial emissions and residential, really, really useful to have that at a local level. And I know I'm councillor for the North Inner City, and it just popped into my inbox at the same time as we were talking here as a new development plan for the city as well. So I think all of this stuff really is going to be so useful for informing the development plan going forwards, and to ensuring that we can get those pieces right for sustainable transition for the local area, and supporting what is happening on the ground here. So I would really appreciate if you could share that with us, and the report sounds fantastic. So I that was my main point, is just say please do share all that data with us, and it is partially our responsibility to translate some of that data to action, and I really hope we can do that as well, because it is really useful to have it, and it makes a big difference when we're trying to argue for hopefully the types of policies that are going to help support some of that stuff happening. So yeah, thank you very much.
We will thanks, Janet. We will distribute these, and of course, if there's a link there in the chat to a form that if people want to leave their email address, we can make sure that you do get copies of all of these as we go along. Just try and finish up for 9 o'clock there. Geraldine, would you like to ask a question? You have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, how's it going? So you mentioned a really interesting thing there about like communities joining together and like, I guess, like increasing their collective bargaining power. But then it's just something you mentioned about being able to claim back like 30% back off the SEAI. Would you be able to maybe mention more about that?
So the SEAI offer grants for upgrading energy efficiency in housing, and they have these as individual grants, so you could go on and just apply as an individual. However, if you apply as part of a community, you'll get an increased percentage of the grant.
Yeah, that's right. It's around. There's two great benefits of that about kind of clustering projects together. One is, as Jared says, you can increase your grant up to 35% for most people. You can claim back 35% of the work, and that actually includes measures that are not covered by some of the individual grants. For example, improved windows and things like that. You wouldn't get an individual grant for improved windows. You can claim the 35% on that. And the fantastic thing is, in terms of just transition as well, that if you are a private individual who is considered fuel poor, you can claim up to 80% of the works on that. So there is a measure there as well on that. So yeah, it's about collecting together. And as I say, we've got a lot of similar type houses and similar type projects.
Thanks, Ian.
And is there a limit on the
Jared,
number of houses that you'd need in the communities to apply for that?
No,
Well, a low limit.
A lower limit. Well, it's the idea would be that you would say to try and get some housing and maybe some commercial projects and maybe even some public sector projects and bundle them together. You know, so you know that's how it will pan out. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning as well that we have approached SEI. We feel that there's another study needed here in terms of the pre-1950s, pre-1900 houses, and the challenge that's going to be to come up with the solutions for retrofitting those. And given that 50% of the stock we think fall into that very challenging category, we feel that. And again, I think Jared, the lady from Dublin City Council, she living in the area, she alluded to this fact that that you just cannot go out and do these houses, that it needs to be given a lot of thought and how to approach it and how to do it. And maybe not every house needs a heat pump, they may get it under gas or something like that as well, which would help to keep the cost down for homeowners as part of that retrofitting. But on top of the grant, the energy supplier will top up the grant as well. So if you mentioned 80% there, it's quite possible that the energy supplier could give you another 20% and finish it off at the 100% for us if they thought that they were going to get lots of energy credits towards the targets that they have to achieve under the EU directive and has been implemented by the Irish government. So anyhow, yeah, the first step that we will be looking at next is to engage with SEI to get funding to carry out a more detailed study, whether it's to employ some kind of a conservation architect or somebody of that caliber or order to actually look at the housing types there and advise then as to what the solutions are that can be done to bring those up to the B2 or better standard.
Okay, thanks. And Sarah Kennedy, you have your hand up there.
Hi, Jared. It's Shane, Sarah's husband. She has taken over the putting the kids to bed duty. So
very good.
I've done well out of that. Yeah. Look, thanks to you and Ivan and Killian and Susan for the detailed presentation. So we have a cafe there at Doyle's Corner, and we've taken measures really initiated by Sarah over the last few years. Around we've switched in our takeaway cups from tree cups to bamboo cups, and our coffee is now zero waste. It's coming in tins, and it's an organic bean and organic milk used in the coffee, I'm just focusing on coffee, I suppose, because that's something that maybe we all gravitate towards. But I suppose one thing we don't have, these are initiatives we're just doing ourselves because it makes sense. It's an obligation that we need to discharge as a business. You know, in terms of our impact and measures we can take to have a more sustainable business, and then also it's better for our customer in terms of the product they consume. But what we don't have is really an expert view on what we're doing. You know, these are, if you like, a layman and laywoman's efforts, somewhat informed by reading around it. So I was interested to see in Ivan's piece that there is a free energy audit and free energy mapping. So I'd like to understand, how do we access that to work out where we are and what more we could do?
So Shane, Ivan was referring to this new SEAI scheme, which is you get a voucher from the SEAI for £2,000 for an energy audit, and then you select an energy auditor from a list. But if we can recommend a local energy auditor to you, and then the energy auditor will do the work, and then the energy auditor get paid by SEAI, and then you get a detailed report that's relevant to you, and it will give you, I suppose, the roadmap as to where you might go forward. And I suppose what we were thinking is if a number of businesses could do this together in Phibsboro, you'll all have pretty much similar opportunities. So by then, all of you doing the work at the same time makes you eligible then for a community grant rather than individual grants, you see. That's the idea then of the Climate Club then, because, you know, bringing groups of businesses together that are in a similar area, you know, but like sort of that will collaborate, sort of, you know, like it's a be a sort of non-commercial type of arrangement, but like, you know, you'd benefit from it collectively, like, you know. So perhaps I think Susan has your contact details. We can send you some more information on that for tomorrow, and get you going on that.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Shert.
You're very welcome. Okay, so we're just at 9. So if there's would anybody else like to ask a question before we finish up? Okay. So and
Somebody else.
yeah, and you're on mute there. There you go.
Just thank you very much. Fantastic presentation. I live in Shandon Gardens, and I'm actually currently in the process of upgrading my house, hopefully from a D2 to a B3. So I will be studying your chart. Will the presentation be available? And also, I didn't get a chance to fill in the form, so we'll be able to fill in the forms.
Yeah.
Before the system goes down, before the Zoom call finishes.
The form will stay there, and you can contact us via Tidy Towns at any time as well, like, you know, and we'll share the presentation and the slides as well. You know?
Right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. So that's it then, guys. Thanks very much for coming along. And we'll say goodbye. And as I say, the link to the form is in the chat if you want to keep in touch with us. Just provide your details there. And we'll say goodnight.
Can I just say thank you, Gerard, for organising this for us? You've been the driving force for this evening, and we do appreciate all the work you're doing. Yeah, we wouldn't get this far without you, Gerard, to be honest. So thank you very much.
Very good.
Yeah, and if anybody wants information, they can email me at the Tidy Towns email address, and we can send on anything that anybody needs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
tidytowns@gmail.com or on Facebook.
Excellent. All right. Good night. Safe home, everybody. If you have to go home.
Thank you, Nana.
Bye. We'll chat again.
Take care. I'll end it there for everyone. So good night.
Bye. Bye.